Hi, everyone. Before Randy gets sent to the hole for whatever heinous intro he has planned, make sure you follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Rating us 5 stars and leaving a review really helps us out. So to those of you who have already done so, we appreciate you. Enjoy today's episode and make sure you stick around to the end to find out what's coming next. Now on to the show in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Read, Watch, Play, your dive into the stories we love and how they're adapted. We are coming to you live from the Brooks Memorial Library here at Shawshank Prison. This is episode 34. We are discussing the number 1 rated movie on IMDb, The Shawshank Redemption. I'm here with Nick Kingston, the Red to my Dufresne. My name is Randy Barrage. Here we go.
It's much kinder than I had anticipated when I made that intro.
Yeah, who's the asshole now?
Still you, but much nicer.
I was like, I don't know. There's such a pair in this, and a theme of this movie, I think, is male friendship. So I'm like, I'll be nice on this one.
Okay, I'll enjoy my reprieve.
So, what are we talking about today? Because I did not know, once again, before this podcast, that this was a book.
Well, I'm glad I could open your world, Randy. We are covering another smash hit from our boy Stevie King, the 1982 novella Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, and The Shawshank Redemption, written by Stephen King, and the 1994 film adaptation directed by Frank Darabont. A little French action by accident.
That was pretty good. Working on your
starring Tim Robbins and the God among men, Morgan Freeman.
Most iconic voice of all time?
Ooh. Yes. I see the others you have listed here, and they are great. James Earl Jones and David Attenborough, but if Morgan Freeman, I got to download that app, the Mindset app or whatever, where Morgan Freeman tells bedtime stories, because I would sleep so much better.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like this movie, cemented is the wrong word because it was kind of the launch point, but especially because everything's voiceovers. I mean, this just began, I think, the Morgan Freeman voice. And now that's just like kind of what he does. It feels like he cashes checks by just talking and things. And it works, and everyone loves him for it.
Yeah.
I mean, also maybe one of the few actors that is like, I don't think I've ever heard a single person say a negative thing about Morgan Freeman in terms of their tastes. How could you?
If you did, I would judge you severely. Just know that I try to not judge people, especially not quickly. But if you just came off hot and was like, you know what, Morgan Freeman, not for me, I'd be like, you're a psychopath.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm typically a person that is like, everything is subjective, and
not this.
There's a lid for every pot, but we are all pots for the Morgan Freeman lid. It's just the world we're living
Preach.
in. Plot synopsis. So, Shawshank Redemption tells the story of Andy Dufresne, a highly educated banker who receives 2 life sentences to be served at Shawshank Prison after being convicted of murdering his wife and the man she was having an affair with. Life at Shawshank is difficult as Andy is faced with a malicious warden, corrupt guards, violent gangs, but most of all, Andy is doing battle with the inner struggle to maintain hope when hope seems a dangerous thing to maintain. Despite the odds, Dufresne builds a life at Shawshank, as well as builds an important friendship with fellow inmate Ellis Redding, known as Red. Against Red's wisdom, Andy is steadfast in his resolve to experience life outside prison again, to feel the warmth of the sun and see the blue of the Pacific Ocean. That
might be your longest one to date.
I don't know. I was feeling it with this one. I was just like, wow. I was just imagining Red is reading this. There's no way.
I should have added 5,000 more words and then maybe get AI Morgan Freeman to read it.
Probably could. I don't know when. I mean, we might as well just talk about this being IMDb's number 1 at the top. I mean,
yeah,
that's
as
crazy.
It should be. Yeah, because I'm going to set the tone early. I know you just pretended to like Morgan Freeman, but I will not hear you attempt to besmirch this movie. You are a hater, and I will have none of it today, sir.
I'm ready. I pulled the receipts because I saw you put this in there, and I just want to know that Nick is the generational hater. I pulled the median scores that we have given over the entire history of Read Watch Play. I'm sitting at a 21.25, and Nick Hader Hinkson is sitting at a 20.5. So I'm a full 0.75. Did I use median? Because when I used average, Argyle brought me way too down. Yes, and I was
Yeah, you
below him.
did.
So
Yes, you did.
I twisted the data.
I have never rated anything as low as you rated
Yeah.
Argyle.
But I think that's generally my lowest. I mean, outside of that, I've been pretty positive on most things we've done.
You gave Argyle like a 4 out of
Worth it. I
25.
mean, I was being kind. Um,
You're so salty still.
but I mean, yeah, this is, I think, in 2008. I'm not sure when IMDb started. I've been on the IMDb train a while, but I
Mhm.
think in 2008, this passed The Godfather on the rating scale there to become the number one rated movie on IMDb. I
Now,
mean,
when you
yeah, go ahead.
say number 1, do you mean the most people have rated it or that it is rated the highest?
The highest. So they have a IMDb top 250 movies as rated by regular IMDb voters. So you need to have an account.
Okay.
And 3 million votes at a 9.3. The
Damn.
Godfather is sitting at number 2 with 2.1 million votes at 9.2. And number 3 is The Dark Knight with 3 million as well at 9.0. And
That's
that
a
is
solid top 3.
it's a solid top 3. I mean, even on Letterboxd, this is number, I think, 8 on their top 250 narrative features in terms of voting. I mean, this is a highly, highly regarded movie.
But
And
a box office flop, no?
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, similar to The Shining, an initial flop, critical darling. I think this is a win in the critic column that Nick often doesn't like to acknowledge his critics out there. But the people did not show up at first for this. And I have something to admit. February 4th, 2025 was the first time I ever watched The Shawshank Redemption.
Shut up.
I'd never seen it a scene in my life before.
No, there's no way you've never seen a single scene with TikTok and Instagram, and I'm like 98% positive you and I have watched this movie together at some point.
Never seen
You've
it.
never I don't buy it.
Unless
Feels
Kid
feels
Brain
like
does not
podcast bait.
remember watching some of this on cable, because, we'll talk about how this is, maybe the cable and the VHS icon, of the late 90s, 2000s. But I never saw it. I just don't know how. And then I think when I realized how esteemed it was, it made me nervous to watch it. And I wasn't intentionally avoiding it, but I was kind of avoiding it because it's almost like I care so much about movies and I'm like, well, if I watch the considered best movie of all time, do I want to crest the mountain already? And what's after that? And
Yeah.
it kind of frightened me. Um, so I just avoided it. And then this was a great excuse to finally watch it.
Huh. Yeah, I think we need to unpack a few things you just said there. And one of those is that The Shining did not do well in the box office deservedly. It's terrible. The second is it's funny you mentioned that it's played on TV all the time because that's literally what my note was
Yeah.
for when you asked me when did I first see this movie. I literally wrote, quote, "Does anyone really know when they first saw this movie? It's on TV all the time in caps."
Yeah.
It feels like we've hit a point where the vast majority of the movie watching world has seen this. And
I
then
mean, I
you,
think you're right.
the movie guy that I know. Of all the movie guys I know, you are the movie guy. And
I know. I just avoided it. I mean, I think everything you said still stands in that. I mean, I think everyone has seen this on cable because the numbers don't lie. Like this was a huge cable movie because I think Castle Rock, who put it out, was bought by Ted Warner Entertainment, which owns like TBS, TNT, and all those. So I think they just ran it on loop.
yes,
And
that feels right.
now that I've watched it too, I mean, It is a perfect cable movie outside of maybe like the length of time with commercials, which is probably pushing this to like 3.5 hours. But it's a type of movie where like you can pick up in scenes and be pretty excited to just like catch it from there. Like I could totally see that.
Yeah. I mean, dude, it's on. I bet you if I went to YouTube TV right now, I could find it on sub channel.
Probably is.
Like an 80% chance.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like this has just been, I don't know. It's like something I haven't even wanted to admit to the world that I've never seen this. I've just been hiding this secret. And now it's done.
Now it's, I mean, cemented in pop culture.
It's recorded.
It's recorded. It's on the internet. It's never going away.
Had you read this? Because I know you're a Stephen King fan, or was this your
I
first
had
read?
not. This was my first read.
Yeah.
I mean, why don't we just, do you want to just jump into it?
Yeah. Do you want to do some pew pews?
Yeah, here you go. If you were sent to Shawshank, what crime would you have committed?
I mean, Shawshank's a pretty, you got to do some shit to get there. Like this isn't petty
That's what I'm
crime.
saying.
I feel like it'd be something unintentional that would result in a serious injury of someone else that I still need to pay the price. I don't know. I ride these like scooters, mopeds around a lot downtown here. I listen to music while I ride. I'm not usually paying attention too much. Maybe I run someone over and they sent me to Shawshank for the first ever moped manslaughter. I mean, and maybe that's what I'm known as. Like
The moped manslaughter.
yeah, the scooter slaughter guy. And, you know, I can't admit that in prison either, that I killed someone on a scooter.
You can't admit you were on a scooter,
I can't
period.
admit I was on a scooter. So it'd probably be something like that. What about you? What would be your role in the prison yard? What do you think?
Ooh, my role in the prison yard? I'd
Like,
probably be having it. I'd be the guy with the baseball glove having a catch with whoever wanted to have a catch. So I'd
yeah,
pass my time.
yeah. I mean, what else is there to do? I mean, especially at this time period, America's pastime. Everybody's probably psyched about baseball.
I mean, that was probably like America's present time.
That's
really.
true.
I mean,
It is.
like, at what point does it become America's pastime? Probably after that. I don't know.
Oh,
What
that's a
would be
good
the
one.
first thing you ask Red for?
Easy. I mean, I don't know how readily available coffee is, but if coffee is on the black market, that's an easy one. I don't know. Yeah, it would probably be that. I don't know, something to pass the time. I don't know what that is. Yo-yo? That I can't kill someone with a scooter and then the first thing I ask for is a yo-yo. I'm painting myself in a bad light in the prison yard. What about you? Anything you're hitting Red up for?
I think the first thing I'm hitting Red up for would be probably candy. Like something to just remind me of the outside. Just a little but not just like a Snickers bar. I'm thinking maybe like
Yeah.
a bag of Swedish Fish or a bag of Hershey's Kisses, like something I can eat slowly over time.
Yeah. I always think it would be so hard not to pick up a smoking habit in prison, but if you could resist it, it probably gives you such a leg up in terms of the bartering system in prison. Like if the cigarettes don't appeal to you and you're not spending all your money or goodwill on that, I'm like, it really opens the door. Because I mean, I guess
Yeah.
that's the same in real life. You know, if you're not spending money on cigarettes, you have money to spend on other things. But I mean, what else are you gonna do? I feel like that's why people smoke. It's just like standing outside, might as well have a cig. You got any more pew pews?
Yeah, I'm gonna make you spell.
Oh no. Solantaneo.
Yep, Zawantane. Spell it.
Zihuantejo.
You were actually way closer than I thought you were gonna be. Zihuatanejo. Honestly, it wasn't as funny because you got close. I thought you were gonna butcher that, and I was gonna roast
Yeah.
you for it, and here we are.
Yeah. I mean, I can relatively speak Spanish, which gives me a leg up there.
Yeah, it's fair. You did spend, what, 3 months in Colombia?
Yeah.
It's pretty sick.
But it is a kind of it's a tough one for sure.
Hmm.
Should we get in the novella?
Yeah, do you have any background on this one?
Not much. I mean, there's really not much on this one. It's published in 1982 as part of a collection of stories from Stephen King
Okay.
called Different Seasons. I mean, this is cracking what this book. It's like 100 and I think my copy was like 108 pages or something. Like not long, 111.
Yeah, that's what mine was.
Um, and then I think it was published again in a. I thought I wrote it down, but it was a collection of Stephen King novels that were adapted into movies. Because I think like Stand By
Okay.
Me is also a short story.
Mhm.
So I forget. It was like King at the Movies or something like that. But I mean, that's about it. I mean, I didn't have, a lot of goods in terms of like, the Shining one we did where there's just so much great King background. It's pretty straightforward in this one. What'd you think of it?
I liked it a lot. It's very close to the movie and this are very
Hmm.
close. There's
Easy.
some creative differences that the movie made, but being so familiar with the movie let me just fall into this from page 1. There was no time needed to get into the swing of things. I was already hooked. I
Yeah.
was already excited. I stayed excited as I was reading, and uh, overall, I'd give Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption, I don't know, like a 23 out of 25.
Yeah, I think on Goodreads, I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 on there. So that about checks out because it still pisses me off you can't do half stars on Goodreads. Like,
It does, because
oh
it's
my
definitely a
God.
4.5 star book, but
Yeah.
because of the when I'm at a half star, sometimes I go up, sometimes I go lower, just depending on how I'm feeling, and for
Yeah.
Shawshank Redemption, I did round up to a 5.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I gave a 4, but yeah, it is a 4 or 5 in my mind. Um, Easy on there. I mean, it's not like the ultimate book enhances the movie, but reading this after watching the movie, which is what I did because I wanted to go into the movie completely fresh and unspoiled,
Okay.
was I don't know, just reading the book was just so nice after it. It was just being in Red's head and the way he talks and just having Morgan Freeman in your mind as you're reading this. It made it such a great experience. And we said it's so short and King is still really cooking in how he writes in this one. Like
Yeah.
it's, I mean, prime, I think Stephen King here in
Easy. I was
terms
gonna
of the
say Pete
writing.
King, but yeah.
Yeah. Just like, just really great stuff. Um, what do you think I mean, what would you say like the story is about and why do you think it resonates so deeply with people? In terms of like, you can take that any way you want. We could jump into themes now, but just why do you think this story means a lot to people?
Y Yeah, I think this is the appropriate time to jump into a lot of the themes you and I had been writing back and
Yeah.
forth in our doc. I mean, hope, friendship, perseverance. I mean, those, I think, always draw in a crowd.
Yeah.
The fact that, especially once you learn in the movie that he really is innocent, didn't do it, or that's at least how it's being portrayed,
Yeah.
or what you're led to believe, like you really feel for the guy. And I think, Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman both did an excellent job making you just feel for their characters. And when you fall in love with the two main characters and they become best friends in this hopeless situation, I mean, I think you're just going to pull heartstrings at
Yeah.
will.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, their friendship is so key to this dynamic. It feels so believable, doesn't it?
It does. It really does.
Yeah. I feel like like at least, especially from the movie perspective, I feel like that dynamic is like what makes it. Um, it's just so good.
And it's not even just them. It's the way the two of them seem to look out for
Yeah.
everybody else in that group of friends as much as possible. That's
Yeah.
really, I mean, I know they're in prison, so like it's not a great setting, but like it is a really nice thing to see anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. The other big one, I mean, you mentioned hope and the whole And what I kept thinking of when I was reading this was, I don't know if you ever read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
I
He
haven't.
was a Holocaust survivor who wrote this book after his experience. And I mean, the whole, Man's Search for Meaning, like a big portion of it is hope. And kind of what Red describes of Andy, of kind of like maintaining this sort of this inner sanctum that Andy had, that like no one else could penetrate. And he kept that kind of will to go on in himself. And it's kind of what Viktor Frankl writes about. I mean, that book is excellent. Like, you should read it. It's almost a great 1-2 punch with Shawshank, because like a lot of the
Okay.
themes are similar.
Yeah.
It's so good. But I thought about it a lot as I was reading this, and about the way Red is describing Andy and saying, and I don't think it's like any shame to anyone else in Shawshank Redemption, like in the prison. Like, that's just a tough thing to come back from, and like a tough way to live, you know, in these type of prison systems. But man, like, I think seeing Andy and seeing the positive impact he can have on those around him by maintaining hope in the face of just everything he's going through. Like, I mean, it sounds cheesy, but it is inspiring. Like, it's just, it makes you feel so good reading and watching it.
And then I agree with everything you
Yeah,
just said. But then on top of that, it's a prison break, which, come on,
yeah,
every every guy's fantasy is being in heat and then breaking out of prison,
yeah,
like in that order. Like,
yeah,
so I'm gonna you got that aspect going for it. Um,
totally.
what's not to love?
I know. I mean, the prison stuff in general is great. I'm trying to think of like other really great prison movies. And I mean, I think this is for sure the best, but I think what they do so well too with the prison stuff is the non-prison scenes, which are really only the beginning, so you're not really feeling it then, but especially like when
Mhm.
Brooks gets out, it's so jarring to be outside of the prison. And it's like exactly what is Red is describing, of like you get so comfortable being in Shawshank in the movie and
Mhm.
reading this book, that like when you're out of Shawshank, it just doesn't feel right. Like, it feels
Yeah.
uncomfortable and it's disconcerting. And I think, that approach, even in the movie, it just like, it really works, and it really works in the book. Um, because man, this prison system is messed up, and it's not any different like today.
No. No, I
Um,
mean, yeah, you're some of the I also think one of the things that really works here
mhm,
in the both the novella and the movie is that they didn't shy away from some of the tougher topics
yeah,
when it comes to the prison system. And I think didn't get overly graphic with anything, didn't labor on any one particular point, but it also didn't shy away from addressing, some really awful things about the system today. I mean, look, think about the labor program.
yeah,
I mean, and what that did to economies, what that does, to inmates, all of that is addressed. And I think that's really that makes it work. Like it adds a realness that I think resonates with a lot of people.
totally. I mean, and like, I thought of that. I mean, it's known today as like the prison industrial complex, where like there's entire economies held up by like, we need to have people in prison to keep these going.
Mhm.
And I mean, even then it was like on a much smaller scale, but it's just like, I just kept thinking about like the hypocrisy of all of this. And especially when you get to the warden, where there's this man who's like standing behind these virtues of like justice and rehabilitation and
The Bible.
religion, when all that really matters to him and the guards is money and power, and keeping a gap between them and the people that they can like subjugate. And
Mhm.
they just like use these inmates, like you said, you mentioned the slave labor, and I forget what is the Inside Out program or whatever it's called in the book,
Yep.
to profit. And it's like this guy who ends up killing himself in the movie, the warden, is committing things that would land him in this prison, and he's acting so high and mighty while he is like untouchable in his post as warden. It's just like, I know this is a fictional story. I'm not delusional about that, but this is not far off from like what has happened in prisons and what goes on.
Yeah.
The other theme you had here was perseverance. What were you kind of thinking with that?
I mean, just think about all the circumstances that I guess really Andy and Red found themselves in, and all of the ways that they had been shut down or treated. I mean, Andy's there presumably innocent,
Mm-hmm.
and they just found a way to keep going. And I
Yeah,
think that it has to be a theme here. I mean, you can't
totally.
have all those coincidences and then not have that be intended.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me a little bit of the bit in the book where he is talking about there's two types of men when Andy's talking to Red, and he's saying, you know, paraphrasing, but he's like, if a hurricane is coming, there's the guy who's gonna, just hope this thing doesn't hit him and, not really do much about it. And there's the guy who's gonna hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And, will to go to painstaking lengths to do that. Um, and yeah, I think that ties into that a little bit, which is just the type of guy that Andy is. It's hard to be that person.
That's a key difference between the book and the movie.
Hmm.
And I think this is probably a great time to jump into the movie because I want to start talking about a few of them because I
Yeah.
think the movie did some really interesting things.
Yeah.
Does that work for you?
Yeah, I'm good.
Do
I
you have
mean,
anything else okay, you're good?
only thing that I'll shout out on King's writing, I thought this was real slick by him, was he said, uh, Red was talking about when Andy was working in the laundry room, and then he got moved up and was kind of, cooking the books a little bit. And he
A
goes,
lot of it.
you know, in a way, Andy was still doing laundry. Instead of washing dirty sheets, he was washing dirty money. And I was like, damn, Steven. It's like
He ate with that.
there were so many parts of the writing just from it's all of Red stuff that he just like really cooked in some parts of this novella that I'd really recommend it to anyone.
Can't
I actually had a quick thing before the movie that I forgot I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah,
Just
let's
a
do it.
theory I have from the novella, which they don't hit on. Uh, they talk a lot about when Andy is in solitary or when Red is in solitary, how you can hear rats running around in the pipes. And I was
Okay.
wondering, are these really rats or is this Andy tunneling out every night? Because when they're talking about Andy's getting out, there was like he was getting all the blueprints for the pipes because he found out he was like near solitary where some of the stuff flowed out. And I was like, I'm
Mhm.
sure there's rats in Shawshank for sure. But I was like, I
Yeah.
wonder if all the rat noise that they heard in solitary was actually just Andy tunneling every night.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I have no idea where the hole is in relation to Andy's cell
Yeah.
to
No idea.
confirm or fight that. So
Yeah.
without a blueprint, it's plausible.
Plausible. We'll have to just ask Steven next time he's on the show.
I thought you were going to say Mythbusters.
That works too. um, all right, movie, not book. We already talked about that. Released in 1994. As you said, directed by Frank Darabont, or Darabont, if we're going to be a little French, starring Tim Robbins, Morgan Freeman. Crazy. Darabont had purchased the rights for this in 1987, did not begin production until 92. And this is the first movie that he actually directed. He was a first-time director on The Shawshank Redemption.
Really?
He had written and directed a short film prior to this, and that was it. And had like a TV movie. So I mean, just coming out of the gate, hitting a home run, which is insane. Had a crazy career. I mean, crazy in terms of strange in that he did this. He kind of became a King director and did The Green Mile and The
Another
Mist.
hit? Not so much a hit.
And then beginning in 2010, his life got taken over by The Walking Dead, of which he's the creator and writer for.
Damn.
Not always a writer because there's like who knows how many
Yeah.
seasons and episodes in that. I think it was like 177 I saw him credited on. But I had no idea he was the creator of that show. I don't know. You have any experience with any of his other stuff he's done?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, The Green Mile's a hit. Seen that,
Yeah.
several times. The Mist, I've seen bits and pieces of, not so much a hit, and then they did that TV series adaptation, which was
Mhm.
also not really good at all, and actually
Okay.
very frustrating.
Yeah.
Don't watch it. I did it for you. It's brutal. And I mean, who's not at least familiar with The Walking Dead?
Yeah. I never watched it. I've seen the pilot.
Of The Walking Dead?
Mhm.
I've seen the first, like, 3 or 4 seasons.
Yeah.
I don't know why I stopped, but
I think
it's
when it
good.
got added to Netflix, it was when they, like, signed that deal that, like, through 2020, which this was in, like, 2012, they signed this, and I was just like, "I can't sign up for 8 years of a TV show," so I was like, "I'm just gonna check out of this one." Like, it's just not gonna happen.
Yeah, fair enough.
Green Mile is a one and done for me. I think I'm too sensitive for that movie, and I just can't put myself through that one. It's great performances, but I just can't do it.
Well, now we know what we're doing for the next birthday episode.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I can read that much. It's just so sad. Um, it's like the opposite side of the coin to this one, where this is a positive prison uplifting story. That one, not so much for me. It's tough.
I mean, speaking of other great prison movies,
Yeah,
The Green Mile.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, King likes to write about his prisons. Maybe because he's been a prisoner of his own mind at times, but who knows?
Oh, see what you did there.
um, as you said, I mean, we already talked. We don't need to talk too much about. It was a box office failure. It grossed 16 million on a 25 million budget upon its initial release. It now I'm seeing anywhere from like 73 to 100 plus million after its re-releases because I think after it got nominated for all these awards, after critics like really loved the movie, they re-released it and it did pretty well right away. Became a Blockbuster Hall of Fame movie and was the top VHS rental at Blockbuster in 1995 after positive word of
Damn.
mouth. And like we talked about, ultimate cable rewatchable. It was on TV all the time, still is. And as of today, which I guess it's not as of today, as of 2014, Warner Bros. Said that it's one of the most valuable assets in their film catalog. Um, and even the guy who plays the warden said he still receives six-figure checks in terms of residuals from this movie today.
We are not glossing over the fact that you said as of today
I
and
bet I
then
realized I had a year.
named 11 years ago.
Yeah, I was like, I started that sentence and then I looked halfway through it and I was like, oh, that's not accurate at all. It's not as of today.
It You were so wrong that if I had a child and then we waited as long as you were wrong, it would be in, like, 5th grade,
Be fifth
Randy.
grade. Um, but the point still stands. I bet as of today, it's still one of the most valuable assets.
Yeah, maybe.
um, and my last bit of movie news is King said that alongside Stand By Me, this is his favorite adaptation of his work. Um, so I think the legacy of this one all around is pretty unassailable. So, Nick, I don't want to. I feel bad like teeing this up as like asking you like, is this the greatest film all time? But maybe just like, what do you think about Shawshank Redemption? How do you feel about this one?
24.5 out of 25.
Yeah.
Like, you can nitpick some things here and
Mhm.
there, but overall, I mean, as an adaptation and, what we're doing here, it's about as perfect as they get. I
Yeah.
think that they made a lot of really good creative choices and how they like what they changed, what they kept.
Yeah.
Narratively, it's mostly the same. I don't even know what to nitpick here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. I mean, I'd say it's like I think I'm in the same boat. I think The Shawshank Redemption, I would give it probably a 24.5 out of 5 as well. Really loved it. I did know going into it. Here's what I knew about The Shawshank Redemption. I knew it starred Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins. I knew his name was Andy Dufresne, and I knew he escapes prison and goes somewhere to the Caribbean. I thought of the
Oh,
Caribbean.
spoiler alert.
Yes. So that's what I knew heading in. And I think I was so surprised at how just kind of like truly uplifting this movie is in a way. And
Mm.
it's just pure feel good.
Okay.
And I think that surprises me because if you go to that IMDb top 250 movies list, or you look at top 250 narratives on Letterboxd, those movies are all like intense and they make you feel a lot of big emotions that are not always like positive emotions. Like usually they're like devastating or they're
Yeah.
like extremely gritty, like The Godfather. Um, but this is like, you just end this movie feeling great. Like, and there's like not many of like the top ones. The only other one is a movie that came out the same year as this, Forrest Gump, is like the only other movie that's in that top 25 on IMDb that is like a true feel good movie. And even though there's like some tough things to watch in this movie, it just, you come away from it feeling like better about the world. Like, am I putting too much like on this movie with that?
I don't think you can put too much on the number one movie on IMDb.
Yeah.
I do have one nitpick now that you say
Yeah.
that. I get that they mostly left Andy alone because of all the stuff he was doing. But in 20 years, 19 years,
Yeah.
nobody looked behind the poster. It never got torn down once. It never ripped. It never whatever.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe. Like if I'm the warden and this guy's making me, thousands and thousands of dollars, what would
Mhm.
probably equivalent in this time to like 100, 200, 300, 400, whatever, $1,000. Yeah, I'm gonna let him have his posters, right? That's not what I'm concerned about here.
Yeah.
So maybe, definitely maybe, but also I don't know. I don't know if I buy that.
Yeah. First of all, I just want to say you said you wanted to set the tone early and worry about me being a hater, and the first thing you want to do with this movie is nitpick. So I just want to call that out
The first thing I did was talk about how good the movie was. Okay.
here.
I gave it probably the highest score I've given any movie that we've done. And I found one tiny nitpick that I don't even know if I believe or not.
Yeah.
I'm trying to work it out as I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
You're
No.
going to call me a hater. After you say Morgan Freeman has a disgusting voice.
I never said that. No, I wrote this down as I was reading it because it was a nitpick, the nittiest of picks in my brain when we
Yeah.
finished the movie. And the way they explained it in the novella is that Andy is also paying off. There's this whole black market going on, and Andy is slipping money to the guards as well to not search his room and to let him, what the guards think is just get away with having stuff on his walls. So I think, King went to some lengths to explain it there,
Mhm.
but I agree, like 20 years of never once, having an issue where someone decides to like upturn the entire cell. A little hard to believe, especially when he got a prison mate for a little bit in the book. I forget the Native American guy. I can't remember his name in the book, but yeah, that one is that's the only kind of, I don't even want to call it a plot hole because I get to the point with some of these things where it's like, I'm just gonna buy into the good bag of goods you're selling me, but it
Yeah.
is one that makes you think.
Well, because even there's times like, remember when he spends 2 months in the hole
Yeah,
and
that's the exact scenes. Yeah,
like you to show this guy you're in charge, you're not going to turn his room upside down?
Yeah. Ah,
Maybe
yeah,
not. I don't know.
I know. And I was like, I don't know. Like the other kind of thing to all this is like you have to really buy into the idea. I mean, and it's also like this is why it's a story because like it works out well. But I'm like, man, they never did one of those night checks that they say is like bi-weekly when Andy's because it sounds like he has to tunnel pretty far into this.
Mhm.
Like never once caught him. But hey, they didn't, and that's why he's in Sawantanejo. But yeah, that was my one note because weirdly when we were watching this movie, I normally take a lot of notes, but I didn't take a single note as we were watching this because I was just so locked in,
Nice.
and that was like my only thought afterwards. I was like, man, nobody checked behind Rita Hayworth.
Or Marilyn Monroe, or there's a third one?
Yeah, Raquel Welch. Yeah, I had this in the notes. I don't know if you saw. This movie set across the 2000s. Who do you think they're having on the wall? Who's Andy Dufresne? A big one. I
Faith
thought.
Hill.
Who?
Faith Hill.
Is that Tim McGraw's wife?
Yeah. There's a time where I genuinely thought she was the most attractive person on this planet, male or female.
Does she still do the Sunday night or Monday night football?
No, I think they changed it.
Okay.
I think they're, like, doing different artists every year based on
Okay.
who's popular now.
Gotcha. I was thinking the late 90s, which I guess would not disqualify from my 2000s moniker here, but my late 90s, the Britney Spears album cover that was like a huge poster at the time.
Yeah. You
I
get
think
on me all the time for breaking the rules, and
yeah.
you set this question. You had the ability
Yeah,
to say 90s or 2000
I did.
and did it.
I mean, I think it was still popular in the early 2000s. Um, but, yeah, maybe I just can't do years. That's just a struggle for me. Um,
Randy, thinking 1998's after
I know.
2001.
Oh. Where do you wanna go next with this? Do you wanna talk about the plot next? Do you wanna talk about casting first? Where do you kinda wanna on-ramp into some more of this
I
movie
mean,
combo?
yeah, let's talk about the plot. Are there any plot points that didn't work for you? Is there any part of the book that you were hoping was adapted that wasn't?
Um, I mean, I think pretty beat for beat to the book. So I don't know if there's anything that happened in the book necessarily that like I was craving to get added. Some changes that I just clocked were um I think Brooks's storyline is a little bit different in the book. I don't know if we actually find out he kills himself. They just kind of make it sound like he just like dies like outside of prison and maybe it's like an assumption and then they wrote expanded that a little bit.
Mhm.
Tommy, I think in the novella sells him out and isn't like killed in the novella by the warden.
Right. Yeah,
And
so
he
Tommy's not
goes to
murdered.
a he goes to a lighter prison sentence at like a better prison or something.
He gets transferred to a minimum security prison to finish out his time.
Yeah. And they also change or not change, but they gave you details on Red's crime in the novella, which
Yeah.
is he murdered his wife and his wife happened to have in the car, he cut her brake lines, their neighbor and their like infant child, which makes you think a little bit differently about Red. And I can see why they didn't include that in the movie then.
Yeah. And I mean, they talk about that a lot, with how he didn't intend for it to, kill other people outside
Yeah.
of his wife. But,
Yeah.
um, to your point about, like, I kinda wanna check on Frank D because it takes a special kind of depression to take a Stephen King and make it darker
Yeah.
by killing Tommy. You know what I mean? Like, it was a crushing blow.
Yeah.
Um, Also a big shock when I read the book. I think another change that they made that worked really well was they simplified the cast. One warden rather than like the 5
Yeah.
or 6 they talk
Totally.
about over
That's a good
20
one.
years. There's less guards you need to know by name because there's not a revolving cast of them.
Hmm.
Even a lot of their crew that they're hanging out with don't get names
Yeah.
in the movie.
Yeah.
I think that's really good. The opera scene
Hmm.
where he, plays the
Great
opera over the
addition.
loudspeaker. Fantastic addition.
Yeah.
Really adds like a level of humanity to, or I guess it shows you how inhuman it was prior to that.
Yeah.
Um, they also gave you answers for a lot of things, such as what you just said with Brooks's death. They also show Andy and Red reuniting in Mexico, which
Yeah.
is not
We'll
in the
save that for
book.
best scenes.
In the book, it's you end with Red going to find him, and you don't know if he ever gets there.
Yeah.
So I liked having that wrapped up in a neat and tiny
Mhm.
bow. I know we talk a lot about how you don't always have to do those things, but in this case, it really made me happy. So I'm
Yeah.
glad they did.
Yeah, that's a good shout on the wardens because that was like kind of confusing in the book where I'm like, I can't even keep these straight. I don't know who's running. And at some point, I was like, I don't even know if any of these is the warden we see in the movie. I was like,
It's not.
I
They
was so
changed,
lost at that point.
or maybe it is. They changed the name of the alter ego, though.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Mhm.
Um, I was because I went back and I actually looked into it, and they were worried about getting sued for using that name by some guy that really has that name,
Okay.
and they changed it to Randall in the movie as an ode to other Stephen King villains in different uh,
Mm,
uh, pieces of his work, which was pretty cool. I'll have to
yeah.
like get the actual answer because I just gave people a crap piece of information that's like half baked. So I'll
No, it's
find
all
that
right.
out and we'll correct it.
No, those are good points though on the plot. I think something that I thought about too after I watched this when I was like even saying to you just now about how this is a different flavor to what is typically at a top of, movie list. And I
Mhm.
think it's just like I know people talk about like they don't make them like they used to anymore, but this
No,
movie
you talk about that.
I talk about that actually. People talk about that, aka I do, to prove my own point. Um, but I just like I feel like this movie is so sincere and earnest, and I really did not expect that when I watched it for the first time. That
Mhm.
I feel like they just really don't make movies with that level of earnestness these days. And the things that like really stick out too are like there's like zero discussion of race. I don't know if there's a single woman in this movie. And like I'm not casting judgment on that in the movie. I'm like saying like that's good or bad. I'm just saying like it just wouldn't happen anymore. And I also feel like so many things today in terms of movies have like there's a lot of like true crime is big and people like want shock value and intensity in their movies. And this is just not that. Like this movie, especially towards the end, is like a little bit just like meandering. Like you feel like you're Red just walking along this path trying to find this tree every day. Like it's just kind of cruising at this real low altitude. And it's just trying to tell like a really sincere story about a guy who overcomes all odds to escape this prison and helps his best friend over 20 years also escape. And they literally sail off in the sunset together. And like that just like doesn't happen often in movies these days. Am I wrong on that?
No, I want to like make fun of you here, but you're probably right. I'm trying to think of a recent example. I feel like some of those like indie romance adaptations or even just, like rom-coms, sometimes they'll get that, right? They'll
Yeah.
have that for you, but in terms of like a very serious drama,
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, I mean, like, even just like we already talked about, like, The Godfather and Dark Knight up there, like, intense in their own way and like not up, what I would consider uplifting. Other things that pop up are like Schindler's List, Pulp Fiction, you know, all the Lord of the Rings, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Fight Club, Inception, The Matrix, Goodfellas. These are like movies that you may leave feeling like extremely energized from, but you're not
Mhm.
walking away feeling like the world is could be a better place if we were all a little more like Andy.
You mean watching Goodfellas doesn't make you think that the world's gonna be a better place?
I love it, but no. Um, man, a lot of movies from those 90s periods that I just rattled off. The other thing that I want to talk to you about is like, I think we talked about on Twilight how s- often a voiceover doesn't really work in a movie. And I think it can be like a little bit of like a crutch sometimes. But in this movie, in terms of delivering this plot, I don't know if there's any other way to do it. And it's just exceptional.
The difference between the really bad ones, like Twilight and some of the others we've ripped apart, and this one is we're not being spoon-fed information that you can just show, don't tell, right? Like, you are allowed to tell people things in movies. You are allowed to have some of that. You need to make it worthwhile and don't just spoon feed me what's on the screen already. Add
Yeah.
some context, add something else, add a different flavor. And they do that really well here. And it's not just like, this is what's happening on the
Yeah.
screen. Now, this is what's happening on the screen.
Yeah.
Now, this is what's happening on screen. I'm like, all right, Twilight, like, I
Yeah.
get it. I can watch.
Yeah. I mean, I think one, it helps that,
It's
Morgan
Morgan.
Freeman is one himself, two, reading Stephen King writing, who knows how to do this stuff really well, where, Morgan Freeman, when you're getting introduced to Andy in a way that, the first day in the prison yard, instead of being like telling you what Andy is like, kind of giving more of statements that, Andy walk around like, he was just kind of wandering about, like he could have been, just taking a stroll in a park. And it's like things
Mhm.
like that where you get the gist of what type of person Andy is without
Yeah.
Red being like, Randy was or Randy, Red, what the fuck is his name? Andy. It's like Andy's way too close to Randy. I'm like,
Just putting yourself in the
yeah, I know.
movie.
Just put myself in there.
In the greatest movie of all time, Randy adds himself
There's
to the
me.
character.
um, but yeah, I don't know. I think having King's writing really helps with
Yeah.
just kind of carrying out some of it, because oh my god, there's so many pages I just wrote down the number of, and they lifted those beat for beat. That Red was kind of reading through.
I mean, that's a great segue into Morgan Freeman as the best cast person in this movie. Do you have anything else you wanted to cover before we jump on?
For casting?
No, for plot before we move to
Oh,
casting.
no, I think I'm good. Yeah, I mean, we gotta talk casting. Let's do it.
So, Morgan Freeman, best cast. Already spoiled the end. Morgan Freeman in The Shawshank Redemption is the best cast, winner of the Watchy or whatever we're calling the awards these days.
Is Tim Robbins underrated in this, you think?
Uh, I don't think he's underrated because I think he's rated pretty highly. I could be
Yeah,
wrong, but I always thought incredibly highly of that performance, and I don't think this movie hits the same if those two aren't in those two roles. It's the same way the
yeah,
chemistry of like, Michael Scott and Holly or Jim and Pam from The Office or there's the entire New Girl cast. There's just a chemistry between these two that is undeniable.
yeah.
That's a-
Yeah, it goes back to that believability, we were saying, and like big theme of this is friendship, and you believe these two sincerely care about each other. Or at least Red really loves Andy, and I think Andy does return that in a lot of ways, but he's just a little more closed off because we're not in his head as much. It's hard to know sometimes what Andy's thinking.
Andy cares in his own way.
Yeah,
He is a special type of person. I mean, they even have that quote, like, my wife says I'm a hard person to know. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like, it's just the way he comes off. I think with what he does for Red and just his, sometimes he's just there, his presence, not really saying much. I think
mhm,
that's how Andy shows that he cares.
yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I thought he was so good in this. One thing that stuck out and instantly on the read was when they first describe Andy. They describe him as short and like small, which I guess he probably wrote that because he has to tunnel out of a pipe. But I feel like Tim Robbins' height in this, something about just like the lankiness. I don't know. It just works. I don't know what it is about it.
It
I
did.
can't describe it, but it works so well.
He was small, but not short. Yeah,
Yeah, he was slender, and I think it just, like, the kinda, like, wispiness to his, like, frame, like, I
yeah.
don't know what it was, it just
Looking like me
added.
and Dave Amodei in high school. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He's probably great at bobbing for apples just like you. Uh, some funny bits was, Morgan Freeman has talked about how I think it was they filmed for 9 hours the first prison yard scene where he was throwing baseballs, and he was really pissed off at the director. Um, and his arm was genuinely sore, but he showed up the next 2 days with his arm in a sling to just make Frank Darabont feel bad. Because I mean,
Nice.
if you're not used to throwing baseballs and you throw one for, like, 9 hours filming the scene to get it right, like, your arm's gonna be pretty sore.
Even lightly.
Even likely.
Okay, even if you are used to throwing
Yeah,
baseballs, if you're throwing baseballs for 9 hours, you're done.
yeah. Yeah, you're gonna be hurting. Um, some casting what ifs originally for Red. Clint Eastwood, Harrison Ford, Paul Newman, Gene Hackman were all in consideration because I mean, I think they describe in the book, they allude at one point to Red being Irish.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, it's a classic. Like, it's really hard to imagine someone else because we have Morgan Freeman as this, but I just don't think anyone else could have done that.
No.
It just wouldn't have been the same. Um, on the Tim Robbins side for Andy, Cruise, Hanks, and Pitt were the contenders. Cruise would have been pretty wild as Andy.
You woulda had the short down.
He would have the short. Yeah, and I can't imagine the behind the scenes we would have gotten on him training to crawl out of a tunnel, the way we get, like, the Mission Impossible, him doing the stunts. He would have taken that
Ye
so seriously.
Yeah, that wouldn't have worked. Brad Pitt was too cool.
Yeah.
Like, he wouldn't have been able to I wouldn't have believed he was a recluse banker.
No. I mean, he's the most interesting in a way out of the 3 for me in this role, but I don't know. Hanks was in doing Forrest Gump this is year, which is why he turned it down, because they offered it to him.
I could have seen Hanks.
Yeah,
Of
Hanks
the
is
3 of them, he's the only one I could see even trying that
yeah.
role.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to imagine or think of another role of Hanks where he gives the sort of Andy has some of that sort of cold exterior, and Hanks, I don't know, maybe Hanks is just, like, so just he's just kinda like the grandfather at this point, you know? And he's just feels so warm and fuzzy that it's hard to imagine him as that. But I could see him doing it at this point in his career. Like, I think he could have done it. But Tim Robbins, I think, worked the best of any of these. And I think it also worked that, we didn't really know who he was then.
Mm,
Um, but even today, though, I see Tim Robbins and I'm probably for the rest of my life going to be like, that's Andy Dufresne.
yep.
Like, he's probably had a trouble escaping that one.
I mean, you don't play that kind of role that has that kind of success in a movie
Yeah.
that's good. Like, you just
Yeah. I mean, not much else to talk about with casting
you
because,
have Gandolfini was
oh,
considered for
yeah.
Boggs.
Yeah, James Gandolfini was considered to be the,
Which one's Boggs again?
Tonks is
What?
the leader of the sisters? Is that what they're called?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, that would have been interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he said he was worried about being typecast because Gandolfini was in True Romance right around here and playing a similar kinda bad guy, so he was worried about it, but
He was
I know, I was like, "Yo, didn't really work out that way." Uh,
You are the most notorious villain
he
of all
became
time.
yeah, he became the poster child of anti-hero. Um, but yeah, that would've been interesting. But
That would have
yeah,
been really interesting. Who was the actor that played Boggs?
I don't know who Boggs was. I mean, this cast is like a lot of, I mentioned before there's another podcast I like called The Rewatchables, and they have an award that they give out called the That Guy Award for you never know his name, but you just know what he looks like in movies. I felt like the whole prison crew was a bunch of that guys.
Mark Rolston.
Mark Rolston.
played Boggs.
Oh, he was
He
in
is
Rush Hour. Ah, he was in The Departed too. Della Hunt. Aliens. Wow.
Lethal Weapon
This is a
2.
classic. I was not familiar with your game, Mark Rolston.
A few Saw movies. Is he Saw? Is he the bad guy in Saw?
Let me see. When were Saul's coming out? 2000s.
No, he is not. That is Tobin Bell.
Yeah. He's done a lot of work. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Does a
Good
lot
for
of
him.
voice acting too. I'm seeing like a ton of video game stuff. Oh, he plays Norman Osborn in the new Spider-Man games. But yeah, no slouches really in the cast in general. I mean, it wasn't as expansive. I think you got a lot of Tommy, which was nice. I liked the
Mhm.
deviation of Tommy. The Brooks stuff was just that was heartbreaking. That was like outside of like that guy getting killed in the beginning. That was like the hardest scene to watch, and probably like
Yeah.
the true downer of the movie was everything with Brooks. But I mean, it's effective. I think it nails home the point that Red's trying to make here. That was just tough, but you don't get the payoff of like Red wanting to continue on and like how meaningful that is if you don't have Brooks not making it on the outside.
In the exact same path.
Mm-hmm. Because I mean, I don't know. It's hard to like, even for me who went in this pretty fresh, knowing that Andy was going to escape. I can imagine the first time you watch this, you're thinking like, I don't know, is it sounds like people were surprised that like Andy made it out, one, and two, that like Red also makes it out. And I think that is extremely effective from everything that happens with Brooks. So it worked. Tommy stuff worked too, because I feel like that's like when things change for Andy in this movie.
Yeah.
It gets a little more intense and he realizes like what he's up against, kind of. Do you feel like a tonal shift there?
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's gotta be one of the hardest moments for him because he faced other hardships in prison, right? Some really terrible things.
Yeah.
However, that was a time where he had hope. And in a movie where they talk about hope and, hope, not letting hope die, that's a really easy moment for him to just let go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think they, even go into more detail about in the book and are a little more direct when Red is saying he saw Andy falter one time over his 20 years in terms of his sort of resolve. And that was when he felt he had the information to kind of get a retrial. And the warden was just shutting this down at every turn. And that was Andy's lowest point. Anything else you want to talk about on casting, or you want to talk about scenes?
No, I'm good. Whatever you want to talk about next.
Favorite scene? What's your favorite scene in Shawshank Redemption?
It's got to be the last scene.
I feel like there's two heavyweights, and I can't begrudge anyone for either of them. But let's talk
Okay.
about that final scene first, and then I'll talk about the other one. I mean,
It's such a
why do
feel
you
good
like it?
moment.
Yeah. When do you, Nick, start that final scene in your mind? Because the last half hour of this movie is just like, it's just great.
It's when you see Morgan Freeman walking on the beach.
That's when you started. Okay.
Yeah. Now, like to your point, the whole leading up to it, him, wanting to violate his parole, but the perseverance of just doing what Andy asked, going, finding the rock, getting on the bus, ditching the country. Great, fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
But to me, that final feel good moment is when when you see him walking on the sand, he found Andy, and it's just boom.
Yeah. It's just so good. Just like they did it. I mean, and just some of the best, I wrote down a few of the quotes from that scene. I mean, just everything that goes on in Red's voiceover, leading kind of when he's in the tree. I think in Buxton is what the area is called. when Red finds the letter, and this is Andy's writing in the letter, and he says, "Remember, Red, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies." And then as Red is traveling, he gives I find I'm so excited I can barely sit still or hold a thought in my head. I think it's the excitement only a free man can feel. A free man at the start of a long journey whose conclusion is uncertain. I hope I can make it across the border. I hope to see my friend and shake his hand. I hope the Pacific is as blue as it has been in my dreams. I hope. And it's just like, damn.
It's amazing writing.
Yeah. Just makes you feel so good. Because even the end of the book, I mean, it does a similar, like, I hope sort of mantra at the end.
Yep.
It's just, yeah, just makes you feel great.
Yes, it does.
I love that. The only contender I would put against that is, man, I just love when Andy negotiates for the bottle of suds when they're
Oh, it's a
tarring the
great scene.
roof. And that's when things really change in the movie. I don't know if I'd like describe it in like thirds. There's like the first third of the movie where like Andy is not adjusting well, having issues with the sisters, getting introduced to the prison life. And then here's where he kind of gets brought into the group of Red. And it's when he negotiates. And here, once again, like just amazing voiceover from Morgan Freeman when he's like, you got like, I forget what he says, paraphrasing. He's like, you got the hardest son of a bitch that ever walked Shawshank to get us, some beers at 10 a.m. on the second to last day of work. And it's just so good.
There's one scene I think, and maybe you wouldn't consider this a heavyweight. Maybe this would fall into like an underrated category.
Yeah.
But another scene I think needs to be talked about right here is Andy gets out of the hole after 2 months. He's sitting there just jaded against the wall, and Red goes up to him and they talk about Mexico for the first time. They talk about getting away, and you can really see Andy's shift in mindset. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the acting there was so, from both of them, was so good. The concern from Red, the shift in mind, so good. And I think that you have to consider that one of the better scenes of the movie, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I said. Like that stretch from essentially, I mean, you could probably consider it from when Andy gets out of solitary the last time through to credits is, I mean, it's just lights out.
Yeah.
And like everything that's being done, the warden throwing, the rock or whatever, through the poster and discovering the hole, and, Red's voiceover of, Andy Dufresne crawled through a river of shit and came out clean on the other side. Like, it's just everything from that moment to the end is just so good. Underrated scene, I'd say as well. Like, I'd say my most underrated scene, I do really love when he asks him during the movie for the Rita Hayworth poster, because
It's a good one.
even though even though I had suspicions of why he was asking in the movie, just because I knew the end, it does still work as a real good surprise, because you think Andy is just like caught up in the moment of this movie and is like, wow, Rita Hayworth, what a dime. And he's like, I need this poster read.
Yeah.
And really he's just getting all jacked up thinking about, chiseling under it. And it just all comes together so nicely. I love that scene. When you mentioned the opera scene, that was a great one too.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic scene.
Yeah. I could even put the opera scene up into the top three, just because it feels like one of the most human moments in the movie, of them just all getting to experience that. I mean, opera of all things, probably not what these, prison guys are listening to on the reg, but they're just so happy.
Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine if you haven't listened to music
Yeah.
in 5-10 years, and all of a sudden you finally get that little taste of not culture, but like just art in general. It's got to be so freeing.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, It was, I don't know, it's when you realize, like, Andy has a little bit of sauce on him because he's in high standing right now, and he just, like it's just kind of like a day where he just wants to stir some shit up and do something for the benefit of everyone, and I
Yeah.
think it's just another thing he does, like the beer, that just bumps him up in the eyes of the rest of the inmates, and it gives more credence to, like, how when Red is saying at the end how after Andy had left, they just kinda sat around laughing and telling stories of Andy. Um, I'm sure that was one of them. Any other scenes you wanna shout out?
No, because if we keep doing this, I'm just gonna sit here and talk about
Yeah,
every
we'll just
scene
talk
of the
about the whole
movie.
movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I do wanna mention as we move to wrap up here, cinematography of this. Roger Deakins, director of photography. I mean, he's a god. He's done Skyfall, No Country for Old Men, Sicario, Blade Runner, Fargo, every other Coen Brothers movie. He's unbelievable, and this movie is, like, no different. It looks great. It's filmed unbelievably. I mean, I just think of so much of it is in prison, which is, like, really hard to make look exciting, but
But he does.
especially some of those moments in the last 30 to 40 minutes, just so great, of Red trekking up, north to find the rock and then arriving on the beach. Oh, it's just so good. And just, like, the warmth of everything in those scenes after the hardness of prison. Ugh, just great.
And it feels like there's a pretty muted color palette
Yeah.
up until Red makes the choice to go look for the rock, in which case it feels like there's an explosion of colors after
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, or even I'd say, like, a pop of color in that dullness that you're talking about is, like, the opera scene we just talked about. Like, the
Mhm.
movie is so hard, and then as soon as Andy is playing this opera music and they do the kind of flyover shot of the prison yard,
It's
it's just
brighter.
kinda bathed in light, and, yeah, it's just
And
different.
the cover on the Mozart that is, like, rich in color,
Yeah,
like, the deep blues and
yeah, yeah, Deakins is the best. He's so good.
yeah.
Um, any thoughts on the soundtrack? We didn't talk about too
The
much.
I only remember Mozart and Hank Williams. All the other uses of sound were so good that I can't even think of them, and I think that's the hallmark of, like, a perfect soundtrack is it's just enhancing your experience without being
Yeah.
memorable, with some exceptions, but,
Yeah.
for the most part.
No, it was
Don't go
good, man.
yawning on me.
Yeah, Thomas Newman did the soundtrack. It like it kind of it was very of its time and, like, cued the right emotions. It was almost kinda like this, like, 30 for 30 sports drama
Yeah,
in a good way, music of just, like, builds at the right times. But I thought it was good. Not too much to say other than that.
it just
Um,
doesn't overtake what's happening on the screen, though. It's
yeah.
like adding salt to food, right? It's
Mhm.
not something you're gonna notice necessarily, but it is gonna make it way, way better.
Yeah, totally. 2 final things to give out. We gotta talk
Boom,
about
hit me.
the real villain and who won the movie. Who's the real
Hmm.
villain of this?
I think I wrote something down somewhere for this.
You did. Came out swinging.
I oh, yeah, the United States legal system.
Yeah. Tough. Tough look. Tough beat.
Yeah, it wasn't good.
Though, I will say, Andy did not mount a great defense for himself in court, and I
The
agree with
book
you.
really drives home how poorly Andy did in his own defense.
Like, does this guy have a lawyer? What's going on?
But to be fair, not being a likable person does not mean you should go to jail for crimes you didn't commit.
Totally agree.
I'm just saying, like,
Totally agree. But he didn't help his cause.
he didn't. I will give you that he did not do maybe the best he could have
Yeah.
in that situation.
Yeah.
Who's
Um,
your real villain?
I mean, I'd say, yeah, maybe the prison system. I mean, there's what hope is there of like true rehabilitation, in any of these cases when, I mean, people are just set up for failure. And I think that's why we do a 15-minute detour into, Brooks, and
Mm,
to really drive that home and drive home the end of this. And Red gives the speech to the board at the end about, he doesn't even know what rehabilitation is or means. Because how do
that
you
was
come out the other side
fantastic.
clean at the end of this? Like, this is not a system designed to actually help people move on and, you know, be part of society. It's just such a dehumanizing thing. So yeah, doesn't really work. Who won the movie for you?
Fucking everybody that's watched it. I mean, the audience, I don't know.
Yeah.
Morgan Freeman, maybe?
Yeah.
Stephen King, finally getting a good adaptation.
Yeah. This is a yeah. There's so many people I could give out for who won the movie. I mean, it's probably Morgan Freeman. You can't downplay Frankie coming out on his first job directing and making The
Yeah, that's
Shawshank Redemption.
huge.
That's crazy.
Frankie D.
Yeah. Whew. But I think it's got to be Morgan, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, and the audience. I
yeah,
mean,
and
like,
yeah.
it's been, you know, 36 years minus 11, as
Mhm.
Randy likes to do.
Yeah.
25 years. Actually, I think it's been 30 since the movie came out, and it still holds up. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Like, just I don't
Yeah.
know. There's so many people, but yeah, I could easily see Morgan Freeman taking home a watchie for this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you make a good point there, because like, this movie is timeless in the sense that because life doesn't change in prison for anybody, and we only see advances of time through Brooks on the outside, maybe Tommy coming in and being a little bit culturally different, almost getting into, a little bit past greaser territory. You don't really know when it's set, like, or at least they don't make it like a aspect of kind of, the atmosphere, the tapestry of this movie. And I think that makes this like a timeless period piece, because it just feels always relevant because nothing changes in prison.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, they tell you it's the 40s, they tell you
yeah,
it's the 50s, they tell you it's when JFK gets shot, and you're like, "Oh my god."
yeah. You're like, okay, yeah, this is what's going on here. Yeah, because even in the beginning, I was like, okay. I was like, I was thinking of this when I was reading. I was like, did Andy serve in World War II? And I think they mentioned that he did. But I was thinking, like, It's I like that the book and the movie stays focused on the story they're trying to tell, because they could get very distracted, like, bringing in other narratives of, like, this is right after World War II, and you think realistically people are probably talking about that in
Yeah.
prison and their experiences with it, but this novella is just like, that's not what this story's about, like, and they stay focused on what they wanna tell, which I think is cool and works really well. Anything final you wanna say for The Shawshank Redemption?
No, this was a fun one.
Yeah,
This
this is
whole
great.
episode has been really fun.
Glad I watched it, finally.
Yeah, seriously, what the heck, man?
No, it's great. I think you know, it's tough heading in with so many expectations. Like, do I think that this is like my favorite movie? And that, like, no, probably not. Do I see why this is considered one of, if not the greatest? Yeah, I can see why. Totally. And I, everything that we've said over the past hour and a half, I think is, in complete service of the, like, how amazing this movie is. And
Yeah,
it's just
agreed.
nice to feel good at the end of a
Right?
long movie. And who wouldn't, want to dream of if they were ever in prison for running someone over with a scooter, sailing into the sunset, and just having some suds with your best friend Red? Sounds great to me.
What more could you ask for, Randy?
Yeah. Uh, anything else?
Nothing.
Let's do it. Thanks for listening, everybody. A lot coming up in terms of the regular feed and bonus episodes. I think airing next. I don't know what's going to come out first. I got to look at the schedule. Nick and I are going to be doing a Severance season 2 mid-season bonus episode. We talked about this on our best things we read, watched, and played, and we discovered that we both love Severance. We're about to hit episode 5 midway through. So we're going to throw out a bonus episode on Severance. I cannot wait to talk about Irving B, Milkshake, all of them. Then next episode of Rewatch Action, doing John Wick. It's going to be coming. We're going to do Fight Club, I think, here pretty soon. I forget what's coming up after Fight Club in terms of regular. We got Gone Girls coming up. Mickey 17. That'll be released in theaters. I've started reading that book. Or the book's Mickey 7. Yeah, the book's Mickey 7, but the movie's Mickey 17. That was
plot twist.
Small changes like that. Yeah, seriously. It's like, if you've started the book, that's a big change. Yeah, and then we're thinking maybe Moneyball for the start of baseball season. So a lot coming your way. If you have any thoughts, questions you want to share, please reach out to us by email at rewatchplaypod@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at rewatchplaypodcast. You can find us on all your major platforms, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Please rate and review 5 stars only, or we will throw you in the pit. Is that what they called in this? The pit, or just solitary? The hole. The pit is something else, some other tough. What is the pit from? I don't know. But if you enjoy this podcast, please tell your friends about it. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks, Nick. And I guess it comes down to a simple choice, really. Get busy living, get busy dying.